Hi guys, tonight we're slipping into the entire history of beans, the forgotten crop that fed empires, filled clay bowls, crossed oceans, and somehow managed to be both dinner and destiny. Imagine a dark field before sunrise, damp soil breathing upward, smoke from a low fire drifting through reeds, and a handful of small hard seeds resting in a palm. How did something so plain become so powerful? How did these little things, dry enough to rattle in a pouch, help build villages, feed armies, and keep ordinary people alive when kings were busy carving their names into stone? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and as you get comfortable, comment where you are watching from and your local time. Because somewhere out there, another tired history lover is probably listening from a kitchen, a bedroom, or a quiet train, thinking about beans at an oddly serious hour. Now, dim the lights, and you find yourself far from glass windows, paved roads and humming refrigerators. You are standing in a world before cities. The air is cool enough to touch your face like wet linen. Grass brushes against your ankles. Somewhere nearby, a bird calls once, then thinks better of it, as if even the morning is not ready to begin. The ground is uneven under your bare feet, soft in places, gritty in others. You smell ash, damp leaves, animal hides, and the faint green sharpness of crushed plants. There is no empire yet, no palace, no tax collector, thank goodness. No one has invented paperwork, which may be one of humanity's brief golden ages. There are only small bands of people moving with the seasons, following animals, gathering fruit, digging roots, cracking nuts, and watching the land with the kind of attention modern people usually reserve for a phone battery at 1%. You walk with them. You carry a woven pouch at your side. It scratches lightly against your hip. Inside are seeds, some round, some oval, some speckled, some dull brown like tiny stones. They are not yet the polished beans of market stalls or supermarket aisles. They are wild, uncertain, and stubborn. Some are bitter, some are hard. Some can make the stomach complain in ways that would not improve a bedtime story. But people are patient. People are curious. People are hungry. Hunger, as usual, is an extremely persuasive teacher. You crouch beside a patch of climbing plants tangled through brush. Pods hang from thin stems, dry and papery, making a faint clicking sound when the breeze moves them. A woman near you breaks one open with her thumb. The seeds fall into her palm with a little tick, tick, tick. Not dramatic. No trumpet. No golden light from the clouds. Just a few seeds landing in a hand. History often begins like that, quietly, while nobody official is taking notes. Long before writing, people learn which plants return after rain. They notice where seeds fall, and they notice which pods are fuller, which vines survive dryness, which seeds soften after soaking, which taste better after long cooking. This is not science with white coats and tidy labels. This is memory, experiment, and dinner, repeated across generations. Beans belong to the larger family of legumes, plants that hide a clever gift underground. Their roots work with tiny bacteria that help pull nitrogen from the air and enrich the soil. You cannot see this happening as you stand there. Of course, to you, it is only a plant that seems to leave the earth a little kinder than it found it. But this quiet partnership will matter enormously. One day, farmers will discover that land planted with legumes can recover strength. One day, fields will be planned around this invisible magic. For now, it is only a small miracle beneath your toes. The first human relationship with beans is not a single invention in one single place. It is more like a murmur rising in many valleys. In the ancient Near East, early farmers gather and eventually cultivate lentils, peas, chickpeas, and broad beans. In the Americas, long after people have crossed into new landscapes and learned new plants, common beans will be domesticated in more than one region. In East Asia, soybeans will slowly become one of the great food plants of the world. The bean story is not one road, it is a web of paths, each one beginning with someone noticing that a seed can wait. That may be the most important thing about beans. They wait. Fresh leaves wilt, fruit bruises, meat spoils. Fish becomes a problem if ignored, and not a poetic problem either. But dry beans can sit in a pouch, a jar, a basket, a pit lined with grass. They can sleep through bad weather. They can survive a journey. They can become tomorrow's meal, next month's meal, even next year's hope. To a wandering family, that matters. To a farming village, it becomes revolutionary. You sit near a fire as dusk lowers itself over the camp. Smoke curls upward, bringing the smell of charred wood and something earthy bubbling in a skin-lined pit or a simple vessel near the coals. The beans must cook for a long time. They do not give up easily. Someone has soaked them. Someone has learned not to hurry them. A child pokes at the fire and is gently pulled back. An older man tells a story with his hands, because words are only part of remembering. The pot gives off a low, steady warmth, and the steam smells green, nutty, and faintly sweet. The meal is simple, it is also profound. You taste a softened seed between your teeth. It is creamy inside, with a skin that slips and resists. It fills the mouth in a way leaves do not. It settles into the body. It gives strength slowly, the kind that lets someone walk farther, dig longer, carry a sleeping child, or sit awake through the night listening for wolves. Nobody at the fire calls it protein. Nobody says fibre. Nobody says complex carbohydrates, because everyone would immediately wander away. They only know that this food sustains. Across early landscapes, the move toward farming is gradual. People do not wake up one morning and say, "Splendid, let us invent agriculture and back pain." They adjust, they return to familiar patches, they scatter seeds near camp, they protect useful plants, they clear competing growth, they notice that the seeds from bigger pods produce, sometimes, more generous plants. Slowly, wild plants become companions. Slowly, companions become crops. Beans are not always easy companions. Some wild legumes protect themselves with toxins or bitter chemicals. Some need soaking, roasting, boiling, or repeated washing. This makes you appreciate early cooks more deeply. Imagine being the first person to say, "Yes, this hard little seed made us all feel strange last time, but perhaps if we soak it overnight, boil it until the moon moves, and try again, destiny awaits, a bold spirit, a questionable evening." Yet that is how food knowledge grows, not from perfection, but from careful survival. Scholars still debate whether some early beans were deliberately planted at first, or merely encouraged near places where people already gathered them. The line between tending and farming can be surprisingly blurry. If you drop seeds near camp and return months later to find vines, are you a farmer? If you clear weeds around useful plants, does the field begin there? History does not always draw neat borders. It leaves footprints in mud, charred seeds in hearths, pollen in soil, and then asks later people to argue politely over tiny evidence. You move through a valley where the seasons matter more than any calendar. Rain taps softly on leaves. Summer heat presses against your shoulders. In autumn, pods dry and rattle. Winter makes stored food precious. Every sound becomes sharper when supplies run low. The crack of a twig, the scrape of a digging stick, the hollow knock of seeds poured into a container. This is where beans begin to change human time. A stored seed is a promise. It teaches planning. It asks people to think beyond the immediate hunger of the day. Which seeds should be eaten, which should be saved, which are too small, too damaged, too precious. The simple act of not eating everything is one of civilization's stranger foundations. Very unfair, really. You discover the future, and the future immediately demands self-control. The pouch at your side grows meaningful. Some seeds are food, some are next season, some are insurance against failure. Some may become trade goods, Some may carry memory, because they came from a grandmother's patch, or a distant valley, or a journey made before a child was born. Seeds are small enough to lose, yet important enough to guard. In this early world, beans also alter the relationship between people and place. A good patch encourages return. A returning group leaves more traces. Hearths deepen. Paths become familiar. Waste creates richer soil. Dogs sleep near fires. Children learn the names of plants by touching them. Grandparents remember when a certain slope produced well after heavy rain. The land becomes storied, not just crossed. You can feel the difference at night. A moving camp has one kind of silence, alert and temporary. A place returned to again and again has another silence, layered and known. The firelight reveals old stones blackened by earlier flames. The same trees lean overhead. The same stream mutters in the dark. Nearby, seeds dry on a mat, faintly dusty beneath your fingers. Their skins are smooth, cool, and hard, like beads made by the earth. And yes, beans may have been beads too. Here is a small oddity for your sleepy mind. In some ancient cultures, beans and bean-like seeds were not only food but objects of counting, play, divination, and symbolism. Long before coins filled purses, small seeds could be moved, sorted, guessed, exchanged, or used in ritual. It is difficult to prove the earliest moments of this, because a bean used for magic and a bean dropped during lunch can look rather similar after several thousand years. Archaeology has many talents, but reading the emotional life of a lentil is not always one of them. Still, you can understand why seeds invite meaning. They look dead, yet they wake. They are buried, yet they rise. They are eaten, yet they multiply if spared. For people living close to soil and weather, this is not an abstract metaphor. It is daily astonishment. A dry seed placed in damp earth splits open, sends down a root, pushes up a shoot, and becomes green life. The whole thing feels almost suspicious. No wonder later societies will wrap beans in taboos, rituals, jokes, and superstitions. A food that sleeps and returns is never just a food. As the fire dims, you watch someone sort the day's gathering. Good seeds in one pile, cracked seeds in another, pods for kindling. A few are set aside carefully, maybe for planting, maybe for a reason not spoken aloud. Hands move slowly in the amber light. Fingernails are dark with soil. Smoke stings your eyes, then softens the stars above you. There are no monuments here, but there is knowledge. The knowledge is carried in gestures, how long to soak, which plants climb best, which seeds cause sickness unless treated, which storage pits stay dry, which baskets keep mice away, or at least discourage them, because mice have always had strong opinions about human food. The knowledge passes from hand to hand, from meal to meal, from season to season. You realize that beans do not conquer the world by being glamorous. They conquer it by being useful. They are quiet, durable, adaptable, and generous. They fit into the spaces where human life is most vulnerable: winter, travel, drought, poverty, uncertainty. They do not demand the spotlight. They wait in storage while poets praise wine, kings praise conquest, and priests praise the heavens. Then, when the glamorous things fail, someone opens a jar of beans. The oldest bean histories are therefore not only about agriculture, they're about humility, about the genius of ordinary people, about cooks whose names vanished, gatherers whose choices shaped crops, children who learned by watching, elders who remembered where the best plants grew. The official story of civilization often begins with kings, walls, and wars, but underneath it, simmering patiently, is a pot. You lean closer to that pot now. The night air cools the back of your neck. Steam warms your face. The smell is earthy, smoky, and comforting. Around you, voices lower. A baby sighs in sleep. Someone adds a stick to the coals, and sparks rise briefly. Tiny orange seeds floating upward into the dark. The beans soften. So does the evening. And in this gentle beginning, before cities lift their walls, before scribes press marks into clay, before armies march on full stomachs and call it glory, you sit with the people who learn to trust a seed. You feel the weight of it in your palm, small, dry, unimpressive, almost laughably modest, yet inside it waits the future. You wake into the soft clatter of a village morning. Not a city, or not yet. Nothing so loud or full of rules. This is a gathering of low houses, smoke holes, packed earth floors, storage bins, reed mats, baskets, children, dogs, and the serious daily business of not going hungry. The sky is pale blue, washed clean by night air. A rooster has not been invented for your convenience in every corner of the world, so the dawn chorus belongs to birds, insects, grinding stones, and people clearing their throats beside small fires. You step carefully between walls made of mud brick. They are cool to the touch, slightly gritty beneath your fingers, and they smell of clay, straw, smoke, and sun. The air holds a damp edge from nearby water, mixed with the warm scent of ash and soaked seeds. Somewhere, a pot lid shifts with a tiny knock. Somewhere else, someone laughs softly, probably at a child, a goat, or a relative making a confident mistake. The village is alive, but not hurried. Work begins because work must begin. No bell rings. No overseer shouts from a tower. Hunger has excellent management skills all by itself. You pass a courtyard where women and men sort food on woven mats. Lentils, peas, broad beans, and other pulses lie in small heaps like dull jewels. Some are pale green, some are tan, some are brown, red, or almost black. Dust clings to them. When a hand moves through the pile, the seeds make a dry whispering sound, like rain heard from inside a dream. Nearby, a clay vessel sits half buried in the floor. His rim is worn smooth from many hands. You lower your palm to it and feel the chill of fired earth. Pottery has changed everything. That may sound dramatic for a bowl, but history is shamelessly dependent on containers. A pot can hold water, grain, beans, oil, salt, broth, leftovers, and secrets. A pot allows food to simmer slowly until hard seeds become soft enough for tired mouths. It can be sealed against insects, set near coals, carried from one room to another, or placed in a corner like a quiet promise. Early villages across the ancient Near East relied on stored foods, and legumes were part of that practical world. Archaeologists have found ancient remains of lentils, peas, chickpeas, and broad beans in farming settlements, showing that these small crops help support settled life alongside cereals such as wheat and barley. Grain often receives the grand applause, because bread is charming and beer eventually becomes very popular, but beans sit beside it, patient and filling, doing the less glamorous work of keeping bodies strong. You kneel beside a hearth. The stones around it are blackened. Ash powders your fingertips when you brush too close. A pot rests near the heat, not directly in the hottest flame, but near enough to coax the contents toward tenderness. The stew inside murmurs softly. It smells earthy, thick, and faintly sweet, with a smoky bitterness from the fire. Someone has added wild greens, crushed seeds, maybe a little fat if the household is fortunate. The steam touches your face and leaves a damp warmth on your skin. This is a new kind of time. Nomadic life follows herds, ripening fruit, seasonal water, and remembered roots. Village life still follows nature, of course, because nature remains the landlord and does not accept excuses. But staying in one place changes the rhythm. You store, you repair, you sweep the same floor again and again. which is perhaps when humanity first discovered both domestic comfort and domestic irritation. You remember which jar contains seed for planting, which contains food for the weak, and which one someone should really have sealed better, because insects have held a small festival inside. Beans fit this world beautifully. They dry well, they cook into softness, they fill gaps between harvests, they combine with grains in ways that make meals more nourishing. A bowl of grain and beans is humble, but it is clever. It gives energy, substance, and the slow satisfaction that lets people dig irrigation channels, plaster walls, tend animals, and lift roof beams without immediately collapsing into the nearest patch of shade. The houses around you are close together, smoke drifts from openings, voices travel easily through walls. Privacy exists, but not in the luxurious modern way where you can pretend nobody heard you drop a bowl. Here, neighbours know the sounds of your household. They know when your grinding stone begins before sunrise. They know if your storage jars are full. They know if your cooking smells unusually rich. A village is a social pot, and everyone is simmering in it. You enter a room where the floor has been swept smooth. Light falls from above in a dusty shaft. Along one wall sit containers of different sizes, baskets coated with clay, jars with narrow mouths, shallow bowls, and storage bins built into the architecture itself. The smell is dry and faintly nutty, with the mineral scent of plaster. You hear the soft scrape of a handstone as someone grinds grain nearby. The rhythm is steady, back and forth, like breathing made visible. Clay vessels are more than tools. They are memory in fired form. A pot remembers fingers pressed into wet clay. It remembers the maker's thumb smoothing the rim, the cord wrapped around its belly, the basket pattern that left marks before firing. Some vessels are plain and practical. Others carry lines, dots, painted shapes, or raised designs. This is where the useful and the beautiful begin to sit together at dinner, which is very human. Even when life is difficult, someone still decides the bowl should look nice. Historians still argue whether the earliest village pots were valued first for cooking, storage, serving, ritual display, or all of these at once. The evidence is stubbornly incomplete. A burned pot with legume residue may suggest stew, but it does not tell you who stirred it, who ate first, who got the last spoonful, or whether someone complained that it needed more salt. The past offers fragments. The imagination must move carefully between them, like bare feet between sleeping dogs. Outside, the village paths harden under the sun. You feel warmth rise from the ground into your souls. Children chase each other past drying racks where pods and stalks hang in bundles. A dog noses too close to a basket and is gently pushed away. The pods click when shaken. A girl splits one open and studies the seeds inside as if they are tiny moons. Her grandmother corrects her hand position, not harshly, just with the tired wisdom of someone who has watched many seeds spill into dirt. Seed saving is a quiet discipline. The best seeds are not always eaten. That sounds simple until you imagine a hungry season. To save good seed when the pot is nearly empty requires trust in a future you cannot see. It also requires agreement. Families must decide. Villages must remember. Crops bind people together, not only because they feed them, but because they force them to plan. In one corner of the settlement, you notice a raised platform or storage area watched with casual seriousness. Surplus is power, even before kings arrive wearing shiny opinions about themselves. If a household has extra beans, extra grain, extra dried food, it has security. It may lend, trade, feast, marry advantageously, survive drought, or help a neighbour. But surplus also creates tension. Who owns stored food? Who guards it? Who measures it? Who decides when to open the jar? The bean does not answer these questions, simply sits there, small and dry, causing civilization. A quirky little thought follows you through the lanes. Some early clay tokens used in accounting systems were shaped like simple cones. spheres, discs, or other tiny forms, and a few looked so much like seeds that it is tempting to imagine food and counting growing up together. Not every token is a bean, obviously. That would be too convenient, and archaeology is rarely so generous. Still, the image is delightful, a world where keeping track of jars, goats, grain, and perhaps pulses begins with little objects that fit between finger and thumb. Just as dinner does, you hear voices gathering near a communal space. A larger pot is being lifted with care, wrapped in cloth or hide to protect hands from heat. The surface of the stew trembles. Steam rises thickly. The smell is deeper now, rich with beans, smoke, herbs, and clay. People settle close. Bowls are passed. A child leans against an older sibling. Someone tears flatbread. Someone else taps ash from a stick. Conversation drops into the gentle register of people eating together. Shared food shapes belonging. It tells you who is kin, who is guest, who is honoured, who must wait, who receives the thicker portion from the bottom of the pot. Meals are never just calories. They are manners, hierarchy, affection, obligation, gossip, negotiation, apology, and occasionally a very diplomatic way to avoid talking about someone's terrible roof repair. The spoon, or dipping bread, brings warmth to your mouth. The beans are soft but not formless. Their skins yield slowly. The broth coats your tongue. You feel the food settle into your stomach with a comforting heaviness. Around you, the village seems to exhale. The air glows with late afternoon dust. Smoke threads upward. The wall behind your back releases the day's heat. This is how settlements become durable. Not through one great invention, but through many small arrangements, seeds saved in jars, pots shaped by practiced hands, fires kept alive, recipes adjusted, work shared, arguments endured, children taught, harvest divided, storage defended against damp, mice, insects, and that one neighbour who's always just borrowing a handful. Night gathers slowly, the sky deepens. The village sounds thin out into softer layers, baby nursing, a pot being rinsed with a scrape of water and sand, a dog turning in its sleep, the last dry seeds poured into storage with a pattering hush. You rest your hand on a clay jar and feel its firmness, its cool patience. Inside, beans wait in darkness, neither alive nor dead in the ordinary sense, but ready. A village is built from walls, yes, from roofs, paths, hearths, and fences, but it's also built from stored mornings, from meals not yet cooked, from the faith that what is sealed away tonight can become warmth in the belly when the rain fails, when the wind sharpens, when the fields are bare. The jar stands quietly in the corner. The fire lowers, and all through the sleeping settlement, behind mud walls and under woven lids, the little seeds keep their silence. You step into the warm breath of the ancient Mediterranean, where sunlight lies across stone streets and the sea glitters beyond white walls. The air smells of salt, olive oil, wood smoke, crushed herbs, and animals moving through the market lanes with the mild confidence of creatures who do not care about philosophy, empire, or proper civic order. Your sandals press against dust. Somewhere nearby, a donkey complains with theatrical sadness. A vendor calls out over baskets of dried legumes. Clay jars stand in rows, their mouths covered with cloth. You hear coins tap into a palm, the scrape of a scale, the slap of flatbread against a hot surface. The market is not quiet, exactly, but its noise has a rhythm, a human murmur shaped by trade, hunger, and the eternal search for a decent bargain. In Egypt, beans had long been part of ordinary life along the Nile. Broad beans, often called fava beans, grew well in the rich silt left by the river's yearly flood. You walk near fields where green plants rise in orderly patches, their leaves soft and greyish under the sun. Irrigation channels shine like strips of polished bronze. Mud sucks gently at your feet near the bank, cool and smooth between the toes. Farmers bend and straighten, moving with the patient repetition that feeds temples, households, and officials who will later claim everything was very well organised because of them. The Nile makes agriculture feel almost cosmic. Each year the river swells, retreats, and leaves behind black soil. Grain fills granaries, vegetables grow in gardens, beans, onions, leeks, bread, beer, and fish become the daily foundation of life for many people. Royal tomb paintings may show banquets with roasted meats, wine, fruit, and elegant abundance. But the worker's bowl tells another truth. Ordinary meals are simpler, sturdier, closer to the earth. You sit beneath a patch of shade beside labourers resting from heat. A pot of cooked beans is passed around. The beans are soft, mashed with oil or herbs, maybe sharpened with onion. The smell is warm, earthy, and comforting, with a grassy edge. Bread tears in your hand, rough against your fingers. You scoop the mixture and taste salt, smoke, and the dense satisfaction of food that does not need to impress anyone. A mainstream fact is plain here in the ancient Mediterranean. Broad beans were among the common pulses that helped feed large populations. They were eaten by farmers, workers, soldiers, sailors, and city dwellers. They could be dried, stored, boiled, mashed, seasoned, and stretched into many meals. That is not the kind of fact that gets carved across temple gates. Sadly, nobody writes, "Behold, the mighty bean kept everyone functional." Yet the statement would be accurate enough. Temples also breathe in the scent of beans. You pass through a court where priests in linen move with careful steps. Offerings are arranged: bread, beer, vegetables, flowers, and other foods for gods who apparently enjoy a varied table. Food in sacred settings is never just food. It is order, gratitude, negotiation, and sometimes a very formal way of saying, "Please do not let the universe fall apart today." Yet beans do not always enjoy a spotless reputation. Some Egyptians may have associated certain beans with ritual impurity, or avoided them in particular priestly contexts. Specialists disagree over how widespread these taboos were, which beans were involved, and whether later Greek writers exaggerated Egyptian customs because foreigners have always enjoyed making other cultures sound a little mysterious. The evidence is suggestive, not simple. A bean in a bowl is easy to understand. A bean in a symbolic system can become surprisingly slippery. You leave the river's green edge and drift toward the Aegean world, where hills rise dry and bright, goats pick their way over stones, and olive trees twist out of thin soil like old hands. Greek homes smell of oil lamps, barley bread, smoke, wool, and sea air. In a modest courtyard, a woman stirs a pot over coals while children hover with the hopeful patience of small wolves, pretending to be polite. Beans sit beside lentils, chickpeas, peas, figs, olives, and bread in the Greek diet. For many households, meat is not a daily expectation. It appears at sacrifices, feasts, or special occasions. But legumes fill the ordinary spaces. You hear them tumbling into a clay pot with a dry patter. Water darkens them. Heat slowly persuades them to soften. A wooden spoon bumps the side of the vessel. The sound is small, but the social world around it is large. At a public meal, beans might feed citizens. At a farmstead, they might sustain families through lean months. In a city, they might be sold by weight in noisy markets. Sailors could carry dried legumes on voyages. Soldiers could boil them in camp. Philosophers, being philosophers, managed to turn even beans into a problem. Here comes the quirky tidbit. Because history has taste, but also a sense of humour, the followers of Pythagoras were famous for avoiding beans, or at least later writers insisted they were. Why? That is where the bean becomes almost too interesting. Some said beans contained souls. Some thought their hollow stems connected to the underworld. Others suspected the rule had to do with digestion, ritual purity, or politics, because beans were used in voting procedures in some Greek cities. Imagine losing an election and blaming legumes. Honestly, stranger things have happened. Ancient historians and modern scholars still argue whether Pythagoras himself truly banned beans, or whether later tradition embroidered the story, or whether the bean taboo represented a mixture of religious and medical and civic meanings. The uncertainty is part of the charm. You can almost see a solemn student refusing dinner while everyone else looks at the pot and thinks, philosophy is exhausting. You walk through an agora in late afternoon. The stones hold the day's heat. A man sells cooked beans from a simple stall, ladling them into bowls for workers whose hands are dusty from stone, wood, or rope. The beans steam in the cooling air. Nearby, someone argues about politics with the heroic confidence of a man who has not yet had dinner. The smell of garlic, vinegar, and oil drifts from another stall. Your cloak brushes against baskets. A scale creaks. A coin flashes. The Greek world teaches you that beans can be practical, symbolic, comic, and suspicious all at once. They are peasant food, market food, ritual puzzle, and philosophical punchline. That is quite a career for a seed. Then the road lengthens westward, and Rome gathers around you. At first, Rome is not marble everywhere. It is timber, brick, mud, smoke, crowded lanes, open drains, laundry, shouting, animals, shrines, and cooking fires. Later, marble arrives with imperial confidence and excellent public relations. But beneath the grand arches and triumphal columns, ordinary kitchens continue to matter. You enter an apartment block, an insula, where families live stacked above shops and workshops. The stairs are narrow. The walls smell of damp plaster, old smoke, and human closeness. From below comes the hiss of oil, the thud of chopping, the calls of street sellers. Many Romans eat a diet based on grain, olive oil, wine, vegetables, cheese when available, fruit, and legumes. Pulses such as beans, lentils, chickpeas, and peas are common foods, especially for people who cannot dine like senators reclining beside silver dishes. The Roman army also relies on durable staples. Grain receives the leading role, of course, but legumes help fill soldiers' stomachs along roads, frontiers, and camps. You stand near a marching camp as evening settles. Leather creaks, metal rings softly. Smoke lifts from many small fires. Soldiers soak and boil pulses in pots darkened by use. The smell mingles with sweat, wool, oiled leather, and trampled grass. A man stirs his meal with the blank expression of someone who has walked too far and would accept almost any stew not actively hostile. Beans are useful for empire because empire is hungry. A road may be paved with stone, but it is powered by meals. A legion does not move on glory alone, though commanders often speak as if it does. Workers building walls, miners pulling ore, sailors hauling ropes, clerks copying accounts, farmers producing taxes in kind, all need ordinary food. Beans and other pulses help make the machinery of expansion possible. Not glamorous machinery, chewy machinery, but effective. Rome itself, food also becomes politics. Grain distributions are famous, but other staples move through markets and households in vast quantities. Urban crowds depend on supply networks reaching across land and sea. Ships bring wheat from North Africa and Egypt. Amphorae carry oil and wine. Dried foods, including legumes, travel more easily than fresh produce. Storage is survival at scale. You walk through a Roman market and feel how the empire compresses distance. Egyptian grain, Spanish oil, Gallic pottery, Syrian glass, African garum, Italian beans, imported luxuries, local vegetables, all jostle together. The smells are intense fish sauce sharp enough to wake the dead, baking bread, wet stone, sweat, spices, manure, incense from a nearby shrine. It is magnificent and slightly too much, like Rome itself. In a humbler kitchen, a cook prepares a dish of beans with oil, herbs, and perhaps a splash of vinegar or wine. Roman recipe collections mention legumes in various forms, including beans and peas dressed with seasonings. Elite cuisine can be elaborate, but the basic bowl remains accessible. Your fingers wrap around a coarse ceramic cup. Heat seeps into your palm. The cooked beans are thick and savoury, softened by time, brightened by herbs, carried by oil. You eat slowly while noise from the street fades into a low blur. Beans also enter Roman ritual and folklore. At the Lemuria, a festival concerned with restless ancestral spirits, the head of a household was said to use black beans in a midnight rite, tossing them away while speaking formulaic words. There is something wonderfully eerie about it. Imagine standing barefoot in a dark house, washing your hands, casting beans over your shoulder, and hoping the family ghosts accept the arrangement. It is domestic, spooky, and oddly practical. Even the supernatural gets a pantry item. This is the Mediterranean gift of beans. They belong everywhere, yet never quite settle into only one meaning. They are food for the poor, provisions for armies, offerings for gods, symbols in rituals, jokes for philosophers, and anxieties for priests. They move from river mud to island terrace, from city market to military camp, from sacred ceremony to late supper. Night comes over Rome with a purple softness. Lamps appear in doorways, a baker pulls loaves from an oven, and the smell rolls into the lane like comfort made visible. Somewhere, a pot of beans thickens beside embers. You hear sandals on stone, a baby fussing, a woman humming, distant laughter from a tavern, the splash of water from a fountain. You touch the wall beside you. It is still warm from the sun. The empires of the Mediterranean love statues, laws, speeches, victories, borders, and names. They remember generals better than cooks. They preserve the pride of rulers more carefully than the fatigue of workers. But under the official memory, the bowls remain. A farmer near the Nile, a Greek child waiting in a courtyard, a Roman soldier stirring supper beneath a fading sky. Each life held, for one quiet meal, by small seeds softened in water and fire. The pot does not boast, it only feeds, and as the ancient streets settle into sleep, the humble bean rests in the dark belly of the empire, warm, ordinary, and more important than marble would ever admit. You stand beneath a high, bright sky, where the fields are not silent, but whispering. Corn leaves rasp together in the breeze. Squash vines sprawl low across the soil, their broad leaves holding pockets of shade. Bean plants climb upward, curling around maize stalks with delicate green insistence, as if the field itself has learned to braid. The air smells of damp earth, crushed leaves, wood smoke, and warm stone. Somewhere, a grinding stone turns maize into meal with a steady, sandy rhythm. Somewhere else, water is poured into a clay jar, and the sound is cool enough to make you thirsty. Here, in the Americas, beans do not simply sit beside human history. They climb through it. You walk between rows planted with care, your fingers brushing leaves that feel slightly rough, alive with tiny hairs. The pods hang in different colours and shapes: green, yellowing, purple-streaked, brown and drying. A woman reaches up and guides a curling vine more firmly around a maize stalk. It is a small movement, almost tender. The maize stands tall, the bean climbs, the squash shades the ground, discouraging weeds and helping hold moisture in the soil. This famous planting partnership is often called the Three Sisters in North American traditions, though related combinations of maize, beans, and squash developed across many indigenous farming worlds. The mainstream fact is powerful common beans were domesticated in the Americas, especially in Mesoamerica and the Andes, and became one of the central foods of many indigenous societies. They grew with maize in diets and fields, adding nourishment, variety, and durability. Maize gave energy. Beans added valuable protein and minerals. Squash brought flesh, seeds, and ground cover. A meal made from these crops could sustain households, travellers, builders, rulers, and ritual specialists. A field made from these crops could turn sunlight into community. You kneel beside the soil. It is warm on top, cooler underneath when you press your fingertips into it. Ants move around a fallen husk. A beetle flashes blue, then disappears. The bean roots, hidden from sight, work with soil life in their quiet chemical way, helping bring nitrogen into reach. No farmer needs modern terminology to value a field that remains generous. You can read the wisdom in the planting itself, in the way height, shade, and climbing strength are shared. The village nearby breathes with food work. Maize steams, beans soak in jars, squash roasts slowly near embers. The smell is rich and layered sweet corn, earthy beans, toasted seeds, chili smoke, and the mineral scent of clay. A child pats a tortilla between small hands, proud and slightly sticky. An elder sorts beans by colour into shallow baskets. Some are mottled like bird eggs, some are red as embers, some are black as night water, some are pale cream, smooth as river stones. Colour matters here. Seeds are chosen not just because they feed, but because they remember. A household may prefer a certain bean for taste, cooking time, storage, ceremony, or family tradition. A red bean may belong to one valley, a black bean to another, a speckled bean to a story told in winter. Food carries geography in miniature. You hold one seed in your palm and feel how a whole landscape can fit inside something smaller than your fingernail. In Mesoamerican marketplaces, beans form part of an astonishing world of exchange. You hear the noise before you enter sandals on packed earth, traders calling, turkeys rustling, baskets shifting, cloth snapping, children weaving through legs with terrifying confidence. Chili peppers are piled like little flames, tomatoes gleam, maize sits in sacks, cacao beans, precious and bitter, may serve as money in some places, while edible beans fill practical baskets for daily meals. The market smells of smoke, flowers, sweat, feathers, damp vegetables, and sharp sauces that promise to wake even the sleepiest soul. You pause near a cellar measuring beans with a gourd. The seeds pour in a soft rush, like dry rain. A buyer tests them with a hand, looking for stones, insects, dampness, damage. Nobody wants a disappointing pot. Ancient life contains many hardships, and frankly, gritty beans do not need to be one of them. Beyond the market, temples rise in stepped forms against the sky. Stone stairs are hot beneath the sun. Incense drifts upward, resinous and sweet. Priests, nobles, farmers, porters, craft workers, and children all live within a world where food and sacred order are woven closely together. Maize often takes the symbolic crown, appearing in origin stories and divine imagery. But beans share the table of meaning. They are planted with maize, cooked with maize, stored with maize, and eaten by the people who raise temples to gods. In many indigenous American societies, agricultural cycles are ceremonial cycles, and planting, rain, sprouting, harvest, and storage all invite ritual attention. You can feel why. The field is never guaranteed. Rain may delay. Frost may strike. Insects may arrive like rude little armies. A crop is not only labour, it is negotiation with sky, soil, ancestors, and chance. Beans, tucked into this system, become part of prayer as much as supper, Scholars still debate how certain symbolic uses of beans should be interpreted in surviving images, oral traditions, and archaeological finds. A painted seed may point to food, fertility, tribute, counting, divination, clan identity, or something more specific that has slipped beyond easy recovery. The uncertainty does not weaken the story. It reminds you that people of the past were not simple. Their meals, like ours, could be practical and sacred at the same time. Now the land rises. You feel the air thin as paths climb into the Andes. The sun is intense. Yet the wind carries a cold edge that slides under your clothing. Terraces step along mountain slopes, each one a human answer to steepness. Stone retaining walls hold soil in place. Irrigation channels glimmer. Llamas move with soft footfalls and long-lash patience. The smell is different here. Dry grass, cold stone, animal wool, smoke, and the clean bite of altitude. Beans grow in Andean valleys and coastal regions, including varieties of common beans and lima beans. The lima bean, known from ancient American domestication, becomes especially fascinating on the Pacific coast. In the North Coast cultures of ancient Peru, bean imagery appears on pottery and textiles, especially in connection with the moche. You see vessels painted with lively scenes, warriors, runners, animals, plants, ceremonies, and sometimes beans with marked patterns that seem almost too deliberate to ignore. Here comes the quirky tidbit, softly strange enough for the edge of sleep. Some researchers have wondered whether patterned lima beans in mochi art may have been used like messages, tokens, game pieces, or mnemonic devices. Painted beans appear in scenes that suggest exchange or movement, and their markings look meaningful to many eyes. Were they part of a system of signs? Were they ritual objects? Were they elite playthings or a modern minds, forever hungry for mystery, asking beans to carry more secrets than they ever promised? No one can say with perfect confidence. The idea remains debated, and that is part of its charm. Imagine a messenger carrying a pouch of marked beans along a dusty coastal road, while waves strike the shore below. Imagine the beans clicking together in the bag, each one painted, counted, remembered. It may be true in some form. It may be a scholarly mirage. Either way, it tells you how deeply these seeds entered the imagination. You sit in an Andean household as evening comes early behind the mountains. A hearth glows in the centre of the room. Smoke finds its way upward, not always politely. Your eyes water a little. A pot rests in the heat, filled with beans, tubers, and herbs. The floor is packed earth. Wool blankets scratch warmly against your arm. Outside, the wind moves over terraces with a dry, sighing sound. The beans here taste different from those in the lowlands. Perhaps they're larger, creamier, seasoned with local plants, eaten with maize, potatoes, quinoa, or chili. Food is not one invention repeated everywhere. It is a conversation between crop and place. A bean grown in coastal soil, a bean grown in mountain valleys, a bean dried in desert air, a bean stored in a highland house. Each becomes local, intimate, particular. Across the Americas, beans also serve mobility. Dried beans are light enough to carry and durable enough for journeys. Traders, hunters, migrants, warriors, and pilgrims can depend on them. A pouch of seeds may become a meal far from home, or a planting far from home, or a memory of home when the night is cold and the road feels too long. You hear beans being poured into a ceramic bowl. The sound is intimate, hollow, and musical. Tick, tick, patter, hush. A hand stirs them through water. Dust lifts, then clouds the surface. A few damaged seeds float. They are skimmed away. The rest sink, darkening as they soak. Patience begins again. That patience shapes power. Cities and states in the Americas depend on farmers whose names rarely survive. Maya city life, Aztec tribute systems, Andean state storehouses, village exchanges, seasonal festivals, household kitchens, all rest on agriculture made reliable by knowledge passed through hands. Beans are part of that foundation. They help feed the builders of roads, temples, plazas, and terraces. They nourish scribes, weavers, merchants, mothers, children, elders, and rulers who may imagine themselves above ordinary hunger until the bowl arrives. A ruler may command tribute, a priest may read the calendar, a warrior may carry a decorated shield, but in the house, someone still checks whether the beans have softened. This is the gentle comedy of civilization. Grand ideas must wait for dinner. Night settles over the fields, in the lowlands. Insects begin their bright chorus. In the highlands, wind presses against walls and then withdraws. The stars appear with startling clarity, hard and white above the dark ridges. Near the hearth, the pot gives off a slow, thick smell. Beans, maize, squash, chili, herbs, smoke. Your shoulders loosen. The day's heat leaves the stones. The cooked seeds yield beneath a spoon, soft but still whole, carrying the taste of earth and human care. You understand now that the sacredness of beans is not only found in temples or painted vessels. It is in their steadiness, in the field where they climb, in the basket where they wait, in the hand that sorts them, in the meal that gathers people into warmth. They are small, yes, but small things can hold a world. You enter a landscape of warm rain, river mist, and fields so green they seem to glow from within. The morning air is thick and soft. It rests on your skin like a damp cloth. Water beads along rice shoots. Frogs call from flooded paddies with the confidence of tiny priests. A water buffalo exhales near a muddy path, its hide shining darkly, its tail flicking away flies that return with the determination of unpaid tax collectors. In the distance, a wooden wheel creaks, somewhere close. A cook lifts a lid, and steam rises with the grassy smell of mung beans, rice, ginger, and wet clay. Asia's bean history is not one story. It is a wide, branching garden. You walk along a raised path between fields. On one side, rice drinks from the shining water. On the other, beans grow in drier earth, some low and bushy, some climbing, some planted between seasons to refresh tired soil. Mung beans, soybeans, adzuki beans, black gram, chickpeas, lentils, and many local pulses move through farms, kitchens, monasteries, caravans, and marketplaces. Each one has its own texture, its own patience, its own small personality. Yes, beans have personalities. Some become soft and sweet. Some remain dignified in stews. Some surrender completely into paste. Soy, as you will learn, prefers to become almost everything. The mainstream fact is clear and important: soybeans were domesticated in East Asia and became one of the most influential crops in world food history. In China, and eventually across Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, and beyond. Soy took on many forms, including boiled beans, flour, tofu, soy milk, fermented pastes, sauces, and bean curd. It fed households, supported vegetarian diets, enriched soils, and entered cuisines with remarkable flexibility. A crop that can become breakfast, sauce, temple food, street snack, seasoning, and animal feed is not showing off exactly. But it is certainly making a point. You step into an early Chinese farming village where millet, rice, vegetables, pigs, chickens, and beans share the human world. The soil smells dark and damp. A woman bends over a basket, sorting soybeans with swift fingers. The seeds are round, pale, and smooth, clicking softly against each other. A child tries to help and mostly relocates the problem from one side of the basket to the other. This is how tradition begins, with instruction, impatience, and someone pretending the child is useful because they are loved. Nearby, soy plants stand with fuzzy stems and leaves that tremble in the breeze. When you brush them, they feel slightly rough, almost velvety. Pods hang close to the plant, modest and practical. Nothing about them announces that future worlds will grind, press, ferment, season, debate, praise, and occasionally misunderstand them. Historians still argue whether soy first became a major field crop because of its value as food, its usefulness in crop rotation, its role in ritual offerings, or some mixture of all three. Ancient texts praise important grains and crops, but the path from wild relative to daily staple is not a neat staircase. Evidence appears in plant remains, old writings, farming manuals, and food traditions, each giving part of the picture. The rest remains misty, like the paddies at dawn. You move toward a town where the market is already awake. Stalls crowd beneath awnings. Rainwater drips from bamboo poles. The smell is astonishing: sesame oil, boiling noodles, scallions, fish, pickled vegetables, wet straw, tea smoke, and the deep savoury aroma of fermented bean paste. Your feet slide slightly on packed mud. People brush past you, carrying baskets, jars, bundles of greens, live birds, and trays of cakes that look far too delicate for such a chaotic street. At one stall, mung beans simmer in a sweet soup. The liquid shines pale green and gold. At another, sprouted beans lie in cool heaps, crisp and white, their tips yellow from new growth. You touch a handful. They are slick, tender, and cool, like rain made edible. Sprouting is one of those brilliant domestic tricks that feels almost magical. A dry seed becomes fresh food in a few days, with crunch, moisture, and brightness. Very convenient, especially when fresh vegetables are scarce or travel has made the body long for something alive. Mung beans spread widely through South and East Asia, valued for soups, porridges, cakes, noodles, and sprouts. In India, mung dal cooks down into a soft golden comfort, often scented with cumin, turmeric, ginger, or ghee. In China and Southeast Asia, mung beans become sweet desserts, fillings, cooling drinks, and clear glass noodles. You taste a spoonful of warm mung porridge. It is gentle, slightly sweet, earthy, and smooth. The bowl warms your fingers. Rain taps the roof above you with sleepy persistence. Then soy changes shape. You enter a workshop where soaked soybeans are being ground with water. The stone mill groans in a circular rhythm. Pale liquid runs into a vessel, thick and foamy. Steam clouds the room. The air smells bean-like, fresh, and faintly grassy. The milk is heated, strained, and treated with a coagulant. Curds gather like soft clouds. A cloth is folded. Weight presses down. Slowly, tofu forms. Tofu is quiet food, but not boring. That is an important distinction. It absorbs flavour, carries texture, and fits itself to the dish with almost suspicious humility. In Buddhist communities, where many avoid meat, tofu becomes especially valuable. You sit near a monastery kitchen, where monks move with calm efficiency. Knives tap cutting boards. A ladle touches the side of a pot. Incense drifts from a hall nearby, mixing with steam from rice and greens. The tofu is cut into squares, soft under the blade, then lowered into broth with mushrooms and fermented seasoning. Temple food carries more than hunger. It reflects discipline, compassion, ritual order, and practical nourishment. A simple bowl can be a philosophy you eat with a spoon. Of course, if the cook is tired, it can also be slightly bland philosophy, but the intention is noble. Fermentation deepens the story. You follow the smell first. It is salty, rich, dark, and almost meaty, though no meat may be present. In a courtyard, jars of soybeans and grain ferment beneath covers, thyme, salt, mould, and human patience transform them into pastes and sauces. The surface may look alarming to the unprepared visitor. Food history often requires courage. The result, however, is powerful umami, depth, preservation, flavor that can turn plain rice into a meal and boiled vegetables into comfort. Soy sauce, miso, doenjang, dubanjang, tempeh, natto, and many other fermented bean foods arise from different regional traditions. Some are smooth and dark, some are chunky and rustic, some smell friendly, some smell like a dare. Natto, with its sticky threads and strong aroma, deserves a respectful pause. You lift a bite with chopsticks, and long strands stretch between bean and bowl like edible spider silk. People either love it, learn to love it, or quietly decide that personal growth has limits. Here is the quirky tidbit drifting through the steam in Japan. Roasted soybeans became part of setsubun, a seasonal ritual in which people toss beans to drive away troublesome spirits and invite good fortune. The phrase often translated as demons out. Luck in turns a pantry item into spiritual pest control. You can picture a household scattering beans at the doorway with sincere purpose, while someone later has to sweep them up. Even magic creates chores. You travel southward into monsoon lands where rain arrives with drama. Clouds pile high, thunder rolls across palm trees, the first drops strike dust and release the smell of earth so strong it feels like memory. In Indian fields, pulses are deeply woven into agriculture and cuisine. Chickpeas, lentils, mung, urad, pigeon peas, and many other legumes feed millions across centuries. The word dal can mean the split pulse itself or the cooked dish, thick or thin, plain or richly spiced. It is food of households, inns, temples, roadsides, festivals, and quiet nights. You sit near a cooking fire in a courtyard as rain hammers the roof. A pot of dal bubbles, yellow and fragrant. Mustard seeds crackle in hot oil. Cumin releases its warm scent. Garlic browns. Turmeric stains everything gold, because turmeric is ambitious. The seasoned oil is poured into the pot, and the aroma rises in a wave nutty, spicy, buttery, sharp, soothing. You tear flatbread and scoop the dal. It is soft, warming, and generous. It tastes like shelter. In temple kitchens, beans and lentils become offerings and meals. In royal kitchens, they may be enriched with cream, nuts, spices, or slow cooking until they become luxurious. On roads, they become portable sustenance. Merchants carry dried pulses across plains and mountain passes. Caravan bells ring, hooves strike stone, dust settles into clothing. At night, travellers cook what will keep grain, beans, salt, dried fruit, tea, perhaps a little spice guarded like treasure. The silk roads carry more than silk. They carry seeds, recipes, techniques, appetites, and rumours. A merchant may not think of himself as a force in agricultural history. He thinks of weather, profit, sore feet, suspicious officials, and whether the next in waters the animals properly. Yet in his bags and memory, crops move. Food ideas drift from oasis to oasis, port to port, monastery to monastery. Beans cross borders without needing flags. You stand in a Central Asian market town where languages overlap like woven cloth. Lentils and chickpeas sit in sacks beside dried apricots, walnuts, tea bricks, spices, and bolts of fabric. The air is dry, dusty, and bright. A pot somewhere contains chickpeas stewed with onions and lamb bones, or without meat when meat is absent. A baker slaps dough against the inner wall of a hot oven. The bread comes out blistered and fragrant. You hold it against your palm, almost too hot, and dip it into a bowl where beans have thickened the broth. This is how bean history travels, not always by conquest, often by usefulness. A seed that stores well earns passage. A dish that comforts tired travellers earns repetition. A crop that fits a new climate earns a field, as slowly. Local tables change. Evening falls over a riverside town. Lanterns tremble in the damp air. Rainwater slides from tiled roofs. A cook washes soybeans in a basin, and the seeds roll under the water with a muted, pearly sound. In another house, mung beans soak for a morning porridge. In a monastery, tofu rests under a weight. In a market lane, fermented paste sleeps in jars, growing stronger in the dark. You breathe in smoke, rain, spice, and steam. The bean world of Asia is not humble in the sense of small. It is humble in the sense of patient. It accepts transformation. It becomes soft curd, sharp sauce, sweet filling, crisp sprout, golden dal, dark paste, travelling ration, ritual charm, and household comfort. It feeds without demanding a statue. It flavours without needing applause. The night grows quieter. The frogs keep speaking from the wet fields. A ladle rests against a pot. Your hands smell faintly of ginger and clay. Somewhere under the soil, roots hold their invisible agreements. Somewhere in a jar, fermentation continues its slow dream. And in the warm monsoon dark, beans wait in many languages, carrying rain, road dust, temple bells, market cries, and the calm promise of another bowl. Misgathers over a medieval field, low and pale, curling around your ankles like cold breath from the soil. The morning is damp, your cloak hangs heavy on your shoulders. Frost silvering the grass begins to melt, leaving your shoes wet at the seams. Somewhere beyond the hedgerow, a church bell rings slowly, not loudly enough to startle, just enough to remind everyone that time now belongs partly to God, partly to the lord of the manor, and mostly to whoever has to get the animals fed before breakfast. You stand near a village of timber, wattle, daub, thatch, smoke, mud, and stubborn survival. The houses lean slightly, as if listening to one another. Chickens scratch near a doorway. A pig snorts in a pen with the self-importance of a minor official. The air smells of wet straw, wood smoke, dung, sour ale, and a pot already warming over embers. Inside one cottage, the ceiling is low enough to make you lower your head. Smoke darkens the rafters. The walls feel rough beneath your fingers, made from woven sticks packed with earth and straw. A woman stirs a pot with a wooden spoon polished by years of use. The stew is thick with dried peas or beans. Onions if the garden has been kind, perhaps a strip of bacon or a bone if the household is lucky. The smell is earthy and smoky, filling the room until even the wool blankets seem seasoned. This is not the shining Middle Ages of storybooks. There are no jewelled goblets on this table, no endless roasted swans arriving under gilded feathers. For most people, medieval food is bread, pottage, ale, vegetables, cheese when available, and legumes. Beans and peas are not side dishes, they are structure. They give weight to the bowl. They help turn water, grain, and garden scraps into a meal that can carry a body through cold work. A mainstream fact rests plainly in the steam across medieval Europe. Legumes such as peas, beans, lentils, and chickpeas formed an essential part of the diet, especially for peasants, monks, urban labourers, and people observing religious fasts. They could be dried and stored through winter, cooked into pottage, ground into flour, or served as a meatless source of nourishment on days when church rules limited animal foods. In a world without refrigerators, supermarkets, or cheerful delivery drivers asking for ratings, dry beans were a serious blessing. You sit near the hearth, your hands extended toward the heat. The fire snaps softly. The pot mutters. A child watches the surface with grave attention, waiting for the moment when the meal becomes thick enough to satisfy. Medieval pottage is not glamorous, but it is adaptable. It can accept almost anything: leeks, cabbage, herbs, oats, barley, peas, beans, dripping, salt if one has it, and desperation if one does not. The spoon reaches your hand. It is warm, worn smooth, slightly greasy. You taste the stew. The beans yield slowly between your teeth. The broth is smoky, a little flat, perhaps, but filling. It has the deep comfort of a food that has taken its time. Outside, the wind worries at the thatch. Inside, the bowl turns weather into something survivable. Fields spread beyond the village in strips. You walk along a muddy path where ridges of ploughed soil rise in long brown waves. Medieval farming in many regions uses open fields divided into narrow holdings. Wheat, rye, barley, oats, peas, and beans appear in rotations that vary by region and century. Legumes matter not only in the kitchen, but in the soil. Farmers may not speak of nitrogen fixation in modern terms, but they understand that some crops leave land in better condition, that animals enjoy certain fodder, and that a field cannot be endlessly bullied into generosity. In spring, bean plants push up from the earth with small green determination. In summer, their flowers draw bees. In autumn, pods dry and rattle. The sound of dried beans poured into a sack is the sound of winter becoming a little less frightening. The sack scratches against your palms. Dust rises as it is tied shut. A mouse watches from a beam with criminal interest. Hunger is never far away. Bad weather, war, disease, taxes, failed harvests, animal sickness, and simple bad luck can turn an ordinary year into a hard one. Beans help, but they are not magic. A stored crop can be eaten too soon. Damp can ruin it. Insects can invade. Lords can demand dues. Soldiers can requisition food with all the tenderness of a boot. Still, a jar of beans in the corner gives a household one more defence against fear. Now the village path leads toward his stone walls and chanting. A monastery rises beyond an orchard, its buildings arranged around a cloister where footsteps echo softly under covered walks. The stone is cold beneath your fingertips. The air smells of beeswax, parchment, damp wool, herbs, and soup. A bell rings for prayer. Sandaled feet move over flagstones. Voices begin a low chant that seems to smooth the edges of the day. Monasteries are places of devotion, learning, discipline, farming, brewing, copying, healing, accounting, and, naturally, eating. Monks may aim their thoughts toward heaven, but their stomachs remain deeply committed to earth. Religious rules often restrict meat, especially during fast days and seasons such as Lent, making fish, eggs in some contexts, dairy in some regions, vegetables, grains, and legumes especially important. You enter the monastery kitchen. It is warm and busy, not noisy in the market sense, but full of purposeful sounds, knives tapping board, ladles dipping, pots shifting, water splashing, a door creaking open to admit someone carrying turnips. A large cauldron hangs over the fire. Beans or peas soften in broth, seasoned with herbs from the garden. Rosemary, sage, parsley, or savoury may lend brightness. The steam dampens your cheeks. Your sleeves smell of smoke almost immediately. Medieval kitchens are generous that way. They do not let you leave unscented. In the refectory, monks sit along long tables. A reader speaks from a raised place while meals are taken in silence, or something near silence, because spoons and bowls have never respected perfect spiritual discipline. Bread is passed, bowls are filled, the beans are plain but carefully cooked, the texture is soft, the flavour herbal and gentle. Eating becomes part of the rule, measured and communal. Historians still argue whether monastic food restrictions were followed as strictly as written rules suggest, especially across different regions, wealth levels, seasons, and centuries. Some communities lived austerely, others found creative interpretations. A ban on four-footed animals, for instance, could leave room for birds, fish, or other convenient categories. because human beings are wonderfully talented at negotiating with their own principles. The documents tell us ideals, kitchen remains, account books, and bones in rubbish pits sometimes tell a more complicated story. Beyond the monastery gates, castles stand as colder monuments to power. You walk into a great hall where rushes cover the floor and smoke climbs toward a high roof. Dogs wait beneath tables with professional optimism. A lord's household may enjoy more meat, more spices, more wine, and more elaborate dishes than a peasant family. Yet beans and peas still appear in storerooms, kitchens, servants' meals, and days of abstinence. Even nobility cannot feast every hour, despite what illuminated manuscripts might imply. Someone must manage stores. Someone must soak the peas. Someone must make sure the lower household eats enough to keep carrying things for the people upstairs. The castle kitchen is hotter than seems reasonable. Fires roar. Iron pots hang from cranes. The smell of roasting meat mixes with onions, ale, smoke, boiling legumes, and damp rushes. A kitchen servant wipes sweat from his brow with a sleeve that has given up on dignity. In one corner, peas are mashed into a thick dish, perhaps flavoured with herbs or enriched with fat. In another, beans cook for servants, guards, or travellers. Beans travel into towns as well. You follow a road toward a walled city, past carts creaking under sacks, hens in cages, bundles of firewood, barrels of ale, and traders with mud on their hems. The gate smells of damp stone and horse. Inside, streets narrow. Water runs in channels. Bells, hammers, wheels, voices, and market cries overlap into a steady urban hum. At a cookshop, a woman ladles hot bean pottage into wooden bowls for apprentices and labourers. The steam fogs the chill air. A boy with ink-stained fingers eats quickly before returning to a workshop. A porter rests his load against a wall and sighs like a man briefly reunited with his soul. The beans are cheap, filling, and available. They belong to the economy of small coins and tired hands. Here is a quirky tidbit tucked inside the medieval feast calendar in parts of Europe. A bean hidden in a cake could decide the king of a winter celebration, especially around Twelfth Night traditions. Whoever found the bean might become the playful ruler of the feast, crowned for an evening of jokes, songs, and mild disorder. A single bean, usually so modest, suddenly creates royalty. It is probably the most affordable coronation in history, though one hopes the kingdom came with extra pudding. As winter deepens, beans become darker in importance. Snow muffles the village paths. Roofs sag under frost. Smoke rises straight into still air. Stored food is measured more carefully. A household opens a bin and listens to the dry whisper of legumes being scooped out. That sound is hope, but also arithmetic. How many mouths? How many weeks? How much can be spared for seed? How thin can pottage become before it is only warm sadness in a bowl? You feel the cold in your fingertips as you carry water from a well. The rope burns slightly against your palm. The bucket is heavy. Back inside. The hearth offers a circle of orange warmth. Beans soak in a pot near the fire, swelling slowly. Their skins wrinkle, then smooth. In the morning they will cook. By noon, perhaps, they will soften. Medieval food teaches patience, whether anyone wishes to learn it or not. Yet there is comfort here. Not luxury, not ease, but comfort. A room full of smoke and people, bread cut thick, a bowl passed from one hand to another, the scrape of spoons, the sleepy mutter of animals nearby. A prayer said over food that could never be taken for granted. The medieval world is often remembered through cathedrals, crusades, crowns, plagues, manuscripts, and battles. Those matter, certainly, but beneath the bells and banner, countless lives move to the rhythm of the pot. Beans feed the ploughman, the nun, the mason, the sailor, the clerk, the servant, the widow, the pilgrim, and the guard watching a gate in sleet. They do not erase hardship. They help people endure it. Night lowers over the village. The monastery bell grows faint. The castle windows glow on the hill. In cottages, embers pulse red beneath ash. A final bowl is scraped clean. The storage jar is covered again. Outside, frost stiffens the fields where new crops will one day rise. You lie near the fire, wrapped in wool that smells of smoke and rain. The room settles. A log collapses softly into coals. In the dark corner, the beans wait in their sack, quiet as tucked-away stars, holding warmth for days not yet lived. You wake to the groan of timber and rope. The world rocks beneath you. A ship breathes around you and creaks, knocks, and sighs, each plank complaining softly as waves lift and lower the hull. Salt air slips through every crack. It stings your lips, dampens your hair, and settles into your clothes until you smell faintly like the sea itself. Below deck, the atmosphere is close and sour, thick with tar, bilge water, sweat, old wood, dried fish, and sacks of food packed away in darkness. You place one hand against a beam. It is rough, sticky in places with resin, cool where sea damp has soaked in. Nearby, barrels shift with a dull thud. A rat scratches somewhere unseen, conducting its own private inspection of imperial logistics. In a corner, tied sacks rest against the curve of the hull. Inside them are seeds that look ordinary enough to be forgotten. Beans from one shore, peas from another, chickpeas, lentils, cowpeas, broad beans, and, increasingly, the common beans of the Americas. This is the age of ships, and ships are hungry creatures. After 1492, plants begin crossing the Atlantic in both directions with astonishing speed. Carried by sailors, colonists, enslaved people, merchants, missionaries, soldiers, and curious gardeners, maize, potatoes, tomatoes, cacao, chilies, squash, and American beans move toward Europe, Africa, and Asia. Wheat, sugarcane, rice, grapes, citrus, livestock, and Old World pulses move toward the Americas. The exchange is never innocent. It travels with conquest, disease, forced labour, religious ambition, commercial greed, and survival. Still, inside that violent movement, seeds pass from hand to hand, and meals change forever. A mainstream fact settles into the ship's dim-hold common beans. Belonging to the genus Phaseolus, originated in the Americas and spread widely around the world after European contact. They entered European gardens and kitchens, then travelled onward through imperial routes into Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. Their colours, shapes, and names multiplied across languages: red beans, white beans, black beans, speckled beans, kidney beans, haricot beans, navy beans, and countless local varieties began to appear in dishes that later seemed ancient, as if they had always belonged there. You climb toward the deck, the hatch opens, and light pours down, dazzling after the hold's gloom. The wind slaps your face. Canvas bellies above you, full and snapping. Ropes hum under tension. The sea is blue-grey and restless, flashing silver where the sun strikes. Men shout in several accents. A cook curses a pot that refuses to stay politely in place. Somewhere, dried beans soak in a wooden tub, swelling slowly as the ship rolls. Shipboard food is repetitive, preserved, and often miserable. Hard biscuit, salted meat, dried fish, cheese, peas, beans, and whatever fresh supplies survive the early part of a voyage. Water goes stale, beer may sour, teeth loosen, spirits decline. A hot pot of beans can feel like mercy, even when the beans are undercooked, oversalted, or seasoned mainly with resignation. You receive a wooden bowl. The beans inside are pale and split, or dark and whole, depending on the cargo and the route. Steam rises unevenly, The spoon is splintery under your fingers. The taste is plain, briny, and smoky from the galley fire, but it is warm. Warmth matters at sea. It makes the body remember land. Across the Atlantic, land waits in shock. European colonizers enter landscapes already deeply cultivated, storied, and inhabited. Indigenous farmers know beans in forms the newcomers have never seen: black, white, red, spotted, striped, curved, flat, tiny, enormous, climbing, bushy, suited to valley, mountain, forest edge, and dry plain. Some Europeans recognize them as relatives of familiar pulses. Others classify them badly, rename them casually, or fold them into existing categories with the confidence of people who believe naming something is the same as understanding it. Specialists continue to disagree about the exact speed, routes, and social pathways by which American beans replaced or joined older pulses in many regions, partly because early records use confusing names. A bean in a 16th century account might mean a broad bean, a cowpea, a common bean, or something else entirely. The written record is like a pantry where every jar is labelled things. Plant remains, paintings, recipe books, seed descriptions, and trade records all help, but none gives a complete map. You step into a port city in Iberia. The harbour smells of salt, tar, fish guts, oranges, wet rope, and ambition. Sailors unload barrels as porters bend beneath sacks. Priests pass through the crowd. Merchants argue over weights. A woman in a market stall pours unfamiliar speckled beans into a basket, while customers examine them with interest and suspicion. New foods do not conquer kitchens instantly. They must pass tests. Can they grow here? Can they be stored? Are they safe? Do they taste good with local oil, herbs, meat, bread, or poverty? Beans pass those tests patiently. In Mediterranean kitchens, American beans slip into soups, stews, and vegetable dishes. In France, white beans eventually help create dishes that become regional icons. In Italy, beans become so deeply associated with everyday cooking that some outsiders nickname Tuscans bean eaters, which is not exactly an insult if dinner is good. In Spain and Portugal, beans settle into thick pots with pork, greens, paprika, garlic, and local habits. Every country behaves as if it personally discovered the best way to cook them. This is how cuisine works: adoption followed by confident bragging. Here is the quirky tidbit, gently absurd and very human. Some American beans arrived in Europe as fashionable curiosities before becoming common staples. Scarlet runner beans, with their bright flowers, were grown partly as ornamentals in some European gardens. Imagine a noble household admiring the pretty blossoms while somewhere a practical cook is thinking, yes, lovely, but can we eat it? Food history often improves when gardeners and hungry people disagree. You walk into a monastery garden where trellised beans climb neatly in the sun. Leaves cast trembling shadows on the wall. The pods hang like small green secrets. Bees work among the flowers with monastic discipline but less chanting. A monk touches a vine, studies the shape of the leaf and notes its growth. New plants interest scholars, physicians, botanists, and collectors. They are described in herbals, drawn in margins, compared to known species, and sometimes misunderstood in fascinating ways. Europe is learning the American bean through gardens as much as kitchens, but empires do not carry seeds only in peaceful hands. You cross to plantation zones where sugarcane cuts the land into rows, and the air is heavy with heat, smoke, molasses, and fear. Beans grow in provision grounds, small plots, kitchen gardens, and marginal spaces where enslaved Africans and indigenous people cultivate food for survival. Cowpeas from Africa, common beans from the Americas, pigeon peas, lima beans, maize, cassava, yams, plantains, and greens create new food systems under brutal conditions. These crops become part of Creole cuisines shaped by forced migration and resilient memory. In the Caribbean, pots thicken with beans and rice, peas and rice, stewed pigeon peas, black beans, red beans, coconut, chili, thyme, pork scraps, fish, or whatever can be obtained. In Brazil, beans become central to daily meals, eventually forming one of the great food pairings of the Atlantic world with rice. In West Africa, American beans and other New World crops join existing legume traditions, not replacing them entirely, but as expanding fields and kitchens. In Central and West African regions, crops such as maize, cassava, peanuts, and American beans alter agriculture in complicated ways tied to trade, empire, and local choice. You sit near an evening fire in a colonial port settlement. The soundscape is layered waves knocking pilings, insect whining, distant hammering, a baby crying, someone singing under their breath, a pot lid tapping as steam escapes. The smell rising from the fire is rich and sharp. Beans with pepper, smoke, onion, and a little fat. The bowl handed to you is heavy and hot. Its rim is chipped. The beans inside are soft, stained dark by spice and long cooking. This food is not merely an imperial import, it is adaptation. People take what conquest has scattered and make meals that carry identity. A Portuguese sailor tastes a dish in Brazil and finds it familiar and strange. An African cook recognizes legumes as old companions but works with new varieties. An indigenous farmer watches foreign animals damage fields while familiar beans are renamed in foreign mouths. A European colonist plants American seeds in a Spanish courtyard. A missionary records a word incorrectly. A merchant sells the mistake by the sack. The bean does not care what empire claims it. It grows where soil, water, and weather allow. It climbs poles in Italian gardens, fills clay pots in Mexico, thickens stews in West Africa, travels in sacks to Manila, settles into Indian and Southeast Asian dishes, and feeds sailors who barely know its origin. It becomes local wherever cooks accept it. That is the quiet genius of beans. They are portable without being rootless. Once planted, they belong to the place that tends them. Night deepens over the harbour, lanterns swing from masts, their reflections shiver in black water. Men roll barrels into warehouses. Women carry baskets through alleys. In a tavern, a stew of beans and salted meat is served to travellers whose maps are better than their manners. At a household hearth, a cook adds herbs from a small garden to a pot of newly familiar seeds. The scent fills the room, comforting and practical. Empire records cargo, taxes, treaties, territory, and profit. It loves ledgers. It loves seals. It loves official letters sent across oceans by men who believe they are shaping the world from desks. Yet in the quiet margins, kitchens shape the world too. They decide which foreign seed becomes beloved, which strange pod becomes supper, which imported crop earns a place in the family pot. You hold a bean between finger and thumb. It is glossy, maroon and cream, patterned like polished stone. It has crossed water, language, violence, weather, and doubt. It has been renamed, traded, planted, boiled, blessed, ignored, praised, taxed, and eaten. It has entered empires without needing a throne. The ship bells ring faintly through the fog. The tide turns, and in sacks, jars, gardens, and cooking pots across the widening world, beans travel farther than the people who first carried them could ever fully know. You sit where the fire is kept low. The night is warm, but not gentle. Heat lingers in the packed earth, in the rough boards of the cabins, in the cloth at your shoulders. Insects sing from the dark grass with a shrill, endless patience. Somewhere beyond the trees, a river moves slowly, carrying moonlight in broken pieces. The air smells of smoke, damp soil, sweat, green leaves, ash, and a pot simmering with beans, rice, peppers, and whatever small scraps the day has allowed. You listen. There are guarded sounds here. A cough quickly softened. A footstep paused. A wooden spoon touching the side of an iron pot with one careful tap. The world of plantation slavery is loud in its commands and quiet in its survival. During the day, fields, mills, yards, docks, and kitchens may roar with forced labour. At night, in the narrow spaces left to the enslaved, sound becomes measured. A song can carry meaning. A cooking fire can gather memory. A garden can be both food and defiance. You walk past small plots scratched into marginal ground. Some are behind cabins. Some are near fences. Some are tucked wherever soil can be claimed for a few hours of human purpose. The leaves brush your fingers, damp and slightly sticky. Beans climb on poles or trail along rough supports. Cowpeas, pigeon peas, lima beans, common beans, and other legumes grow beside corn, okra, squash, chilies, greens, yams, cassava, or plantains, depending on the region. These gardens are not decorative. They are survival stitched into dirt. A mainstream historical fact is steady here. Enslaved Africans and their descendants across the Americas often cultivated provision grounds or garden plots to supplement inadequate rations, preserve food knowledge, and support local markets where permitted. These spaces varied widely, shaped by law, climate, plantation discipline, and personal skill. Some enslaved people sold surplus produce, poultry, or prepared foods in nearby markets, using tiny openings in brutal systems to gain resources, contacts, or moments of control. Control matters. A bean plant is small, but planting it can mean choosing something. Choosing a seed remembered from a parent, choosing a taste that belongs to a homeland, or to a new community made under pressure, choosing to save the best pod, choosing to trade a handful, choosing to feed a child something warmer than the official ration. These are modest freedoms, fragile and never guaranteed, but they are not meaningless. You kneel beside a low bean plant. The soil is crumbly, still holding the day's heat. When you press your palm into it, you feel tiny stones, roots, and the faint movement of insects underneath. A woman beside you splits a dry pod and lets the seeds fall into her lap. They land softly against her apron. She sorts them by touch in the dim light. Whole seeds for storage, damaged ones for the pot, the finest ones set aside for planting. Her hands are quick, cracked, and sure. The pot near the fire thickens. Smoke curls around your face and makes your eyes sting. The beans have been cooking for a long while because beans do not care about your schedule, your exhaustion, or the fact that tomorrow begins too early. They demand time. In this place, time is controlled by others, stolen by bells, overseers, ledgers, and quotas. Yet the cooking pot makes another kind of time. Slow time, shared time. Time measured in softening skins, rising steam, murmured stories, and the scrape of a ladle along the bottom. Across the Caribbean, the American South, Brazil, and other parts of the Atlantic world, bean dishes formed in the meeting of African, indigenous, European, and local foodways, rice and peas, red beans with rice, black bean stews, pigeon peas with coconut, cowpeas with greens, beans with cornmeal, beans mashed, boiled, spiced, stretched, carried, hidden, sold, blessed, and remembered. These dishes are not simple mixtures. They are records of displacement and invention. They show how people under coercion transformed available crops into food with flavour, dignity, and continuity. You hear a song begin, low at first, hardly more than breath. It moves through the dark without hurry. Another voice joins, then another. The rhythm settles near the rhythm of stirring. A child leans against someone's knee, sleepy but unwilling to miss the meal. The iron pot shines dull red where firelight touches it. Fat beads on the surface, if there is fat. Pepper stains the broth. Beans break down and thicken everything, turning fragments into substance. This is one of the quiet truths of stew. It gathers what has been scattered. That is why the pot becomes powerful. It can accept little things, a handful of beans, a scoop of rice, a scrap of smoked meat, wild greens, hot pepper, herbs, the last onion, the memory of a different spice, the idea of a dish from a coast across the ocean. It does not restore what was stolen, nothing so simple, but it lets people create continuity inside rupture. A meal cannot break chains, but it can keep language, taste, skill, and tenderness alive long enough for resistance to breathe. Historians still argue over whether particular bean dishes in the Atlantic world can be traced directly to specific African regions, or whether most emerge through broader adaptation among many displaced communities. The difficulty is real. Enslavers rarely recorded recipes with respect. Oral traditions carried knowledge that written archives ignored. Ingredients changed across climates. Names shifted. A dish might hold a memory of Senegambia, Congo, the Bight of Benin, indigenous America, Iberia, and a local garden all at once. Food refuses to sit neatly in a ledger, which is rude of it, but historically fair. Here is a quirky tidbit, odd and revealing in the way small things often are. In some plantation and market settings, beans were so ordinary that they became units of informal measurement, bargaining, or playful counting among children and vendors. A handful, a gourdful, a calabash, a scoop. These could matter more than official weights. In folklore across the Americas, magical or lucky beans also appear, sometimes linked to tricksters, hidden wealth, or impossible growth. The famous tale of a boy trading for magic beans belongs to Europe, but the deeper idea is global. A seed that looks worthless may open a door nobody expected. You move toward a market at dawn. The road is still cool beneath your feet. Mist lies low over ditches. Women carry baskets balanced with practiced grace. Some enslaved market women, where local rules allowed, sell produce from provision grounds, beans, greens, peppers, eggs, poultry, fruit, cooked food. The market smells of mud, fish, tobacco, coffee, molasses, sweat, horse dung, and hot cakes frying in fat. Voices rise as bargaining begins, coins pass, news passes more quietly. Markets can be dangerous spaces. They can also be channels of information. Who has been sold away? Who is sick? Which ship arrived? Which law changed? Which road is watched? Which family needs help? A basket of beans may be only a basket of beans. Yes. It may also be a reason to speak, to move, to listen, to connect. You touch the rim of a woven basket. It is rough, flexible, faintly warm from the carrier's body. Inside, beans lie in mixed colours: cream, brown, red, black, speckled. Their surfaces are matte with dust. A buyer runs fingers through them, listening for dryness. Good beans sound clean when poured. A small, hard rain. Damp beans are trouble. Mould is trouble. Stones are trouble. The market woman knows this. Her knowledge is not ornamental. It is economic intelligence, botanical skill, and daily courage. In a plantation kitchen, another world of beans unfolds. Enslaved cooks prepare meals for owners, overseers, visiting guests, workers, and their own communities, often with unequal access to ingredients. They know how to season abundance for some and scarcity for others. They know which pot receives cream, which pot receives scraps, which pot must stretch. The kitchen smells of smoke, onions, pepper, boiling legumes, roasted meat, spilled sugar, and hot brick. Heat presses against your cheeks. Your shirt sticks to your back. Copper pans gleam for display, but the heavy iron pot does the enduring work. Food labour is knowledge labour where the cook understands timing, preservation, substitution, taste, and the tempers of those who eat. That knowledge can protect, comfort, and sometimes resist. Extra seasoning hidden in a humble pot. A portion saved for someone old or ill. Seeds kept back when everything's supposed to be counted. A recipe remembered without writing. Carried through hands rather than books. Night returns, and you find yourself beside the low fire again. The pot is nearly empty. A ladle scrapes the bottom with a tired, intimate sound. Someone laughs softly at a joke too quiet for outsiders. A baby sleeps against a shoulder. The smoke has settled into hair and clothing. The beans have left their earthy sweetness on the tongue, along with heat from pepper and the soft graininess of rice. There is grief here, and the story must not smooth it away. Families are separated, labour is forced, bodies are controlled, names are taken, languages pressured, laws twisted into cages. Yet within that darkness, people make culture because people do. They plant, they cook, they sing, they teach children how to sort seeds, how to watch rain, how to stretch a pot, how to keep a flavour alive. They turn provision into memory, and memory into strength. The fire lowers, crickets take over the silence, a final handful of beans is tied in cloth and tucked away, not for tonight's hunger, but for soil not yet opened. The bundle is small against the palm. It weighs almost nothing. Still, it carries a field, it carries a taste. It carries the stubborn living insistence that even under empire's harshest shadow, a seed can be saved. A meal can be shared, and a people can remain more than what was done to them. You enter a factory morning, and the first thing you notice is not the sight, but the sound. Metal clanks against metal, belts turn, steam hisses from pipes, boots strike wet floors. Somewhere, a whistle blows with the emotional warmth of a scolding aunt. The air is thick with heat, vinegar, tomato, sugar, salt, oil, coal smoke, and the unmistakable earthy smell of beans cooking in enormous vats. It is not the intimate smell of one household pot. It is dinner multiplied until it becomes industry. You stand near a row of workers in aprons. Their sleeves are rolled. Their hands move quickly, sorting, rinsing, filling, sealing. White beans slide down chutes with a rattling rush. Tin cans move in shining lines, each one waiting to become a small metal pantry. The floor is damp beneath your shoes. Steam beads on your face. A foreman checks the machinery with the focused suspicion of a person who knows one broken gear can ruin the day. This is the modern bean, no longer only gathered from a garden, boiled beside a hearth, or carried in a sack. It is measured by the ton, cooked by schedule, sealed by machine, stacked in warehouses, shipped by rail, sold in shops, packed into military supplies, and opened by people who may never have seen the field where it grew. A mainstream historical fact settles into the clatter. Modern canning grew from early 19th century experiments in food preservation, especially the work of Nicolas Appert in France and the development of sealed metal containers in Britain. By the later 19th and 20th centuries, canned foods became central to military supply, urban diets, long-distance trade, and emergency storage. Beans, because they were durable, filling, and suited to sauces, became one of the great canned staples. You pick up a sealed can. It is warm from the line, smooth at the sides, sharp near the rim. It feels oddly powerful for something so plain. Inside is a meal that does not need a cellar, a servant, a fireplace, or a whole afternoon of soaking. It only needs an opener, a spoon, and someone tired enough to appreciate convenience. Modern life has many disappointments, but opening dinner in under a minute is not one of them. The can changes the meaning of time. A worker leaving a factory after 12 hours can heat beans quickly. A sailor can carry them across cold water. A soldier can eat them near the front. A family in a crowded city room can keep them on a shelf. A shopkeeper can stack them in a bright pyramid and pretend this is progress, which, to be fair, it partly is. You walk into a growing industrial city. Brick buildings rise through fog, chimneys breathe smoke into a grey sky. Streets smell of coal, horse manure, rain, frying fat, and cheap soap. Carts splash through mud. Tram bells ring. Children weave through traffic with terrifying skill. Behind upper windows, families live in rooms where space is precious and fuel costs money. In one small kitchen, a woman opens a tin of beans. The lid gives with a scrape and pop. Tomato sauce glistens red against the pale beans. She tips them into a pan, and the smell rises sweet, tangy, and familiar. Bread sits nearby, cut thick. The flame flickers blue beneath the pan. A child watches with hungry seriousness. A man removes his cap and rubs his hands. Stained from work, the beans warm, bubble, and thicken. Canned beans do not erase poverty. They do not solve low wages, crowded housing, dangerous factories, or the exhaustion of industrial labour. But they offer speed, calories, and predictability. They turn the shelf into a kind of security. That matters in cities where fresh food may be expensive, fuel limited, and time brutally divided by bells and shifts. In Britain, baked beans in tomato sauce become especially beloved, eventually settling into that great national arrangement called beans on toast. It is a dish so simple that it almost sounds like a joke told by a tired person. Yet it endures because it is warm, cheap, filling, and oddly comforting. Toast crackles under the spoon. Sauce soaks into the bread. The beans are soft, sweet, and savoury. Rain taps the window. Naturally, because the dish seems designed for weather that has given up on charm. Across the Atlantic, baked beans carry another identity. In New England, especially Boston, beans cooked slowly with molasses and salt pork become tied to local tradition. The nickname Beantown grows from this association, though the city itself has had complicated feelings about being reduced to a casserole. Still, the dish matters. It links colonial trade, Saturday cooking, religious rhythms, regional pride, and the slow sweetness of molasses darkening a pot. Here is a quirky tidbit for the half-dreaming mind in parts of Maine and neighbouring regions. Whole beans were cooked outdoors in covered pots buried in pits lined with hot stones. The pots slept underground while heat did the patient work. It is basically a bean spa, if spas involved smoke, dirt, and an impressive amount of pork. Community suppers built around such beans became local traditions, mixing practicality with ceremony. Historians still debate how much canned beans transformed national food habits, and how much they simply industrialized older traditions that already existed. Did the can create modern comfort food, or did it merely speed up dishes people already loved? The answer shifts by country, class, and decade. Factory records, advertisements, cookbooks, military manuals, and family memories all tell part of the story, but not the whole supper. Now the ground trembles under artillery. You stand in the mud of a 20th century trench, and the factory sound has become war sound. Shells thud far away. Rain slides down timber supports. Boots sink into muck. Wool uniforms itch against damp skin. The air smells of wet earth, tobacco, cordite, unwashed bodies, leather, tea, and tins opened with knives or bayonets. Men sit close together under low shelter, their faces grey with fatigue. A tin of beans is opened, the lid bends back, someone jokes weakly about fine dining, someone else eats straight from the can because manners, under the circumstances, have been placed on leave. The beans are cold or barely warmed, metallic at the edges, but they are food. They are familiar in a place built from terror and waiting. They give the mouth something ordinary to do. Military rations in the World Wars relied heavily on preserved foods, including canned meat, biscuits, vegetables, soups, and beans. Supply lines became lifelines. An army's strength depended not only on weapons, but on railways, ships, warehouses, kitchens, tins, labels, and the stubborn ability to feed millions. Beans fitted the logic of mass war because they were cheap, filling, and stable. They could sit in crates until needed, then become supper in a ruined field. You hear the small domestic noises inside the larger violence, a spoon scraping metal, tea poured into an enamel mug, a match struck under cupped hands, laughter too tired to last. A soldier shares a few beans with a friend. Another writes home about food, because food is easier to describe than fear. The tin becomes a tiny room of normal life, opened in a place where normal life has been shattered. The modern nation also feeds itself through schools, hospitals, prisons, canteens, workhouses, cafeterias, and relief kitchens. Beans appear where budgets are tight and many bowls must be filled. They are served in soup lines during economic hardship. They are added to stews in institutional kitchens. They sit in government warehouses as reserve food. They enter lunchboxes, boarding houses, railway buffets, and roadside diners. You step into a mid-century diner. The floor smells faintly of bleach and old coffee. Chrome shines under fluorescent lights. A radio murmurs behind the counter. Beans simmer near sausages, eggs, toast, or rice, depending on where you are. In another country, a lunch pail opens in a mine, and beans sit beside cornbread. In another, a schoolchild eats beans in a cafeteria where trays slide forward with a clatter. In another, a family stretches one can with onions, potatoes, and yesterday's leftovers. Beans become democratic food, though not always by choice. They cross class boundaries strangely. The wealthy may eat them as heritage cuisine, rustic and charming. The poor may eat them because they are affordable. Soldiers eat them because logistics says so. Children eat them because adults insist. Students eat them because rent exists. A food can be beloved and resented at the same time. Beans understand this. They have listened to many sighs. Advertising gives them new voices. Bright labels promise nourishment, modernity, thrift, speed, and family happiness in colours bold enough to startle a Victorian grandmother. Commercial slogans turn beans into jokes, habits, and brand loyalty. In Britain, beans, Ben's Heinz becomes one of the famous food advertising lines of the 20th century. A little silly, yes, also memorable, which is exactly the point. The bean has entered mass culture, wearing a label and smiling from a billboard. You stand in a supermarket aisle, fluorescent lights hum overhead. Cans line the shelves in disciplined rows: baked beans, black beans, kidney beans, pinto beans, chickpeas, refried beans, cannellini, navy beans, chili beans. The labels show steam, spoons, tomatoes, flags, farmhouse fonts, cheerful colours, and promises of home. Your fingers trail along the metal tops. Each can is small, cheap history. The atmosphere is calm in a very modern way. Climate control replaces weather. Barcodes replace bargaining. The sins no longer rattle in a basket, but sit silently under printed paper. Yet when the can opens, old things return: steam, softness, salt, warmth, the comfort of food that fills the bowl without asking for ceremony. Evening settles over an apartment block. Elevators hum. Traffic sighs beyond the windows. Someone comes home tired, drops keys into a dish, and opens a can. The pan warms, sauce bubbles, bread toasts. A spoon stirs slowly. The smell rises, sweet and savoury, unheroic and deeply welcome. Modern nations like to tell stories about industry, war, progress, productivity, and identity. Beans move through all of them, not as decoration, but as fuel. They feed workers who build machines, soldiers who carry rifles, children who grow in crowded cities, families balancing wages and bills, and lonely people eating quietly at the end of long days. The spoon touches the bowl, the room softens, and inside the ordinary can, behind the bright label and the thin metal wall, the old crop continues its patient work, turning heat and hunger into something that feels, for a moment, like home. You stand in a field where the future smells like rain on dry soil. The sky is wide and pale. Clouds gather slowly, not as a storm yet, just as a promise. Beneath your shoes, the earth is cracked in places, soft in others, and threaded with roots too fine to see unless you kneel close. A breeze moves through rows of bean plants, making the leaves flicker silver green. The sound is gentle, like pages turning in a quiet room. Somewhere nearby, a pump coughs, a gate clicks, and a farmer rubs a thumb across a pod, judging whether it is ready. This is not the old world of kings and granaries. It is not the age of sail, smoke, or ration tins. It is your world, almost. A world of climate worry, crowded cities, supermarket shelves, family recipes, seed banks, soil science, global trade, and dinner still needing to happen at 6, because history may be vast, but hunger remains punctual. Beans are suddenly fashionable again, which would probably surprise the beans if they were capable of vanity. They have spent thousands of years being useful, and now people are rediscovering that usefulness with fresh urgency. A mainstream fact is clear legumes such as beans, lentils, chickpeas, and peas are widely valued today because they provide protein, fiber, minerals, and other nutrients while often requiring fewer resources than many animal-based foods. They also support more diverse farming systems and can improve soil fertility through their relationships with nitrogen-fixing bacteria. You walk between the plants. Leaves brush your hands, cool and slightly rough. Bees dip into flowers with soft, business-like focus. The smell is green, dusty, and faintly sweet. If you lift a handful of soil, it crumbles across your palm, smelling of minerals, roots, and life too small for the eye. Beneath this ordinary surface, entire communities of bacteria, fungi, and insects are working. The field is not a machine. It is more like a crowded neighborhood where everyone is exchanging favors and occasionally eating each other. Nature is beautiful, but not sentimental. Farmers now speak of soil health, crop rotation, cover crops, intercropping, drought resilience, and regenerative practices. These words may sound modern, but the basic wisdom is old. Do not exhaust the land. Do not trust one crop too much, and respect plants that give something back. Beans can be part of that respect. They do not solve every problem, despite what overly cheerful pamphlets may suggest. But they offer tools, and tools matter. You enter a seed bank where the atmosphere changes completely. The air is cool, dry, and carefully controlled. Lights hum softly above rows of sealed containers. Metal shelves slide with a whisper. Labels mark varieties gathered from farms, forests, villages, research stations, and markets. Inside packets and jars rest beans of astonishing beauty. Black, red, cream, gold, purple, speckled, striped, mottled like bird eggs, marked like tiny maps. You hold one sealed packet and feel how light it is. A few grams, a few seeds, a small inheritance against uncertainty. Seed banks preserve genetic diversity, and diversity is not just pretty, it is practical. Some beans tolerate heat better, some resist disease, some mature quickly, some handle poor soil, some taste wonderful in soup, which is also important, because humans are more likely to preserve what they enjoy eating. The future may depend not only on laboratory breakthroughs, but on old village varieties saved by gardeners, farmers, cooks, and stubborn grandparents who refused to abandon the bean that made the best stew. Historians and agricultural scientists still argue over how future food systems should balance traditional crop diversity, modern breeding, biotechnology, local knowledge, and global markets. Some emphasize high-yield varieties and large-scale production. Others warn that uniformity creates risk. Many argue for a careful blend. The uncertainty is not a failure. It is the shape of the problem. Feeding people well while protecting land, water, culture, and climate is not a puzzle with one tidy answer. It is more like a soup, and yes, someone must keep stirring. You step into a research greenhouse. The air is warmer here, damp against your skin. Fans hum. Water drips from irrigation lines. Bean plants grow in pots under measured light, each tagged with numbers and notes. A researcher presses a leaf between careful fingers, checking for stress. Another studies roots washed clean of soil, pale threads tangled like fine hair. There is no romance in the fluorescent glow, perhaps, but there is devotion. Quiet, repetitive, nerdy devotion, which is responsible for more human survival than most ballads admit. Outside the laboratory, beans remain wonderfully ordinary. You enter an apartment kitchen in a large city. Rain taps the window. Traffic murmurs below, softened by glass. A can opens with a clean metallic snap. A bag of dried beans sits in a pantry beside rice, pasta, tea, and spices. A pressure cooker clicks on the counter, releasing a faint hiss. The smell of garlic warming in oil spreads through the room. Onion follows, then cumin, tomato, chili, bay leaf, or whatever the cook loves enough to repeat. Modern bean cooking lives in many forms: black bean soup, dal hummus, refried beans, cassoulet, feijoada, red beans and rice, chili, bean salads, falafel, akara, baked beans, bean burgers, bean pastes, sweet red bean desserts, soy milk, tofu, tempeh, miso, and countless local dishes with names that feel like home to someone. The bean has not become global by becoming identical. It has become global by becoming intimate in many places. You taste a spoonful from a pot. The beans are soft but whole. The broth is thick, fragrant, and warm. It carries garlic, herbs, smoke, or spice. It settles into the body slowly. The bowl is inexpensive, but not poor in meaning. It belongs to students, grandparents, athletes, monks, farmers, nurses, office workers, migrants, children, and people cooking alone at midnight because life has become strange and the pantry is still there. Here is a quirky tidbit for the sleepy edge of thought. Some gardeners today grow heirloom beans with names so dramatic they sound like tiny operas. Jacob's cattle, dragon's tongue, good mother stallard, tiger's eye, orca, Christmas lemur, and rattlesnake beans all sit in seed catalogues looking far more glamorous than anyone expects from legumes. A bean named dragon's tongue does raise expectations. Fortunately, it does not breathe fire into the saucepan. That would complicate dinner. In a community garden, you watch children push seeds into the soil. Their fingers are clumsy, their questions endless, and their attention span heroic for about 12 seconds. Still, the lesson lands somewhere. A seed goes into darkness. Water follows. Days pass. A shoot rises. Leaves unfold. A flower appears. A pod forms. The cycle is visible. Small enough to understand, large enough to matter. Gardens can be acts of food security, education, memory, and pleasure. In city neighborhoods, refugee communities, indigenous farms, schoolyards, prison gardens, and backyard plots. Beans continue to connect people to soil. A vine climbing a fence may carry a family variety brought across borders. A row of beans may teach a child that food does not begin in plastic. A saved seed may keep a language word alive. Yet the future is not gentle by default. Heat waves intensify. Rain arrives too heavily or not at all. Soils erode. Farmers face debt, market pressure, pests, and unpredictable seasons. Cheap food can hide expensive damage. Expensive food can leave people hungry. Beans belong inside these tensions, not outside them. They are promising, but not magical. A world cannot simply eat one crop and become wise. Humans have tried single-answer thinking many times, and honestly, the results have been mixed. So you imagine a better table instead. Not a perfect one, a better one. It includes beans and grains, vegetables and fruits, local dishes and traded foods, science and tradition. Farmers paid fairly. Soils treated as living systems, and kitchens where cooking is not only a burden, but sometimes a rest. It includes cans for busy nights, dried beans for slow weekends, school meals that nourish, disaster stores that hold, and recipes that let people feel they belong. Evening comes to the field. The clouds finally release rain, light at first, then steady. Drops strike leaves with a soft patter. Dust darkens. The smell rises, deep and mineral, the old scent of earth accepting water. You stand under a shed roof and listen. The bean plants bend slightly, then lift. Pods tremble. Somewhere in the distance, a kitchen window glows. You understand the future in a seed is not only technology, though technology will matter. It is also patience, saving what is useful, sharing what is nourishing, refusing to overlook the small things because the large things are louder. Empires rise with banners, engines, laws, ships, armies, advertisements, data and speeches. Then the day ends, and someone still asks what there is to eat. The answer very often is beans. The pot warms or the rain softens, the field drinks. Now let your thoughts slow with the sound of water on leaves. Imagine the last light moving across the rows, touching each pod with a quiet gold, then fading into blue. The air cools against your face. Your hands are warm around a simple bowl. Steam rises in pale ribbons, carrying garlic, earth, and rain. Nothing grand needs to happen now. The little seeds have done their work. They have crossed hunger, weather, memory, and time, and they have arrived here, at the edge of sleep, humble as ever. Let the field grow dim, let the kitchen grow still, let the spoon rest beside the bowl. Outside, the rain continues, patient and soft, covering the world in a hush of green beginnings.